The Ultimate Warrior was replaced. One of the wildest theories in wrestling was that the Ultimate Warrior died, and WWE secretly replaced him. Think about that. A guy known for his wild energy, neon paint, and muscle-bound physique, supposedly swapped out like a stunt double, and fans were convinced. It all started in the early 90s after Warrior disappeared from WWE shortly after SummerSlam 91. When he finally made a reappearance nearly 8 months later at WrestleMania 8, something felt off. His hair was shorter, his face paint looked different, and fans swore his body wasn't as massive as before. The rumor mill went into overdrive. His biceps had burst, and this new guy was really Kerry Von Erich with the Warrior's face paint on. Did WWE think fans wouldn't notice if they just slid in a lookalike? Back then, there was no internet fact-checking in seconds. All people had were wrestling magazines and fan gossip. Before long, it became one of wrestling's most talked-about stories. Of course, the truth is simpler. It was always the same guy. Jim Hellwig actually disappeared from scheduling due to a contract dispute, and he returned leaner and with a slightly updated style. But that didn't stop fans from swearing they'd cracked a secret WWE cover-up. Crazy, right? A man so larger than life people thought only death could explain his changes. Macho Man and Stephanie McMahon. If you want infamous, this is it. For decades, fans have whispered about a supposed scandal involving Macho Man Randy Savage and a young Stephanie McMahon. Yeah, that's right. The story goes that Savage had some kind of relationship with Vince McMahon's daughter, and that's why he was suddenly blacklisted from WWE in the mid-90s. Now, let's be clear, there's never been a shred of proof, but the rumor stuck because of how Savage left the company. One day he was one of WWE's biggest stars, the next he was gone, and WWE never mentioned his name again. For years, Vince McMahon would praise past legends but completely ignore Savage, which only fueled the gossip. Fans figured something huge must have happened behind the scenes. The Stephanie story became the go-to explanation, whispered on message boards and even in industry wrestling circles. It was shocking, taboo, and explained the silence. Some swore that's why Savage jumped to WCW, why Vince never forgave him, and why Savage didn't return for a Hall of Fame induction while he was alive. There's no evidence. Nothing. Just speculation built on timing and WWE's cold shoulder. It's still debated today and one of wrestling's juiciest rumors because it mixes larger-than-life characters with a forbidden storyline that could have rocked the industry if true. It's wild how this one still gets people talking decades later. Be real. Do you think the silence around Savage was just coincidence or a cover for something bigger? Let me know in the comments. Rick Rude and the amputation rumor. When ravishing Rick Rude passed away in 1999 at just 40 years old, wrestling fans were stunned. Officially, it was heart failure linked to an overdose of medication. But like so many wrestling deaths in that era, the truth quickly got buried under a mountain of rumors. And one of the strangest was that Rude was about to have his penis amputated. Yeah, that's the story that spread through locker rooms and fan circles. The rumor claimed that years of steroid use and other health issues had caused severe complications, and that doctors were preparing to remove part of what had been, ironically, a big part of his ravishing persona. And this was seemingly confirmed by Jim Neidhart. The rumors were that the humiliation of the procedure pushed him into despair, and he committed suicide. Rude was a guy whose whole character was built around his body, his looks, and his sexuality. The idea that that part of him was in danger of being taken away turned into one of wrestling's most lurid myths. Sid Vicious and the squirrel in his pants. When it comes to wrestling rumors, some are wild, some are dark, and some are just plain ridiculous. Enter Sid Vicious and the infamous story that he once put a live squirrel down his pants. Yeah, you heard that right. The tale goes that Sid, known for being unpredictable both in and out of the ring, used to bring a pet squirrel on the road with him. Supposedly, someone challenged him to prove just how tough he really was and put his furry friend down his trousers. Now, squirrels do have a love for nuts, but as you can imagine, the critter didn't exactly take this well. The rumor says Sid got scratched up and bitten all over before finally letting the poor thing loose. Vicious was in agony and had to be taken to hospital for stitches and shots. And because this is wrestling, the details only got crazier as the story was passed around. Did it really happen? Nobody knows for sure. Some wrestlers swear by it, others roll their eyes. But Sid already had a reputation for being larger than life and a little unhinged. So when fans heard about the squirrel in the pants incident, it sounded exactly like the kind of outrageous thing he would do. The Lita prostitution rumor. Before Lita became one of WWE's biggest stars, she was already making waves in the wrestling world. But with fame came gossip, and one of the nastiest rumors to follow her was that she had prostituted herself in Mexico before joining WWE. So where did that even come from? Back in the late 90s, Lita moved to Mexico, low on funds and looking to become a wrestler. Somewhere along the way, fans, or maybe even bitter rivals, twisted that story into something darker. Whispers spread that she was supporting herself by doing wrestlers favors in exchange for training, and the rumor snowballed. She was grinding it out, trying to break into wrestling, and suddenly people were painting her with this ugly label that may, in part, have gained some traction from her past working as a stripper. But this rumor stuck for years because it played into the tabloid-style drama fans sometimes attach to women in wrestling. And once it got online, it took on a life of its own. Even though Lita went on to become a Hall of Famer and a pioneer for women's wrestling, the prostitution in Mexico story has lingered as one of the most unfair rumors in wrestling history. Shawn Michaels and Vince McMahon's relationship. When it comes to backstage gossip, few stories get whispered about more than the rumor that Shawn Michaels and Vince McMahon had more than just a business relationship. That's right. The word going around in the late 90s was that the Heartbreak Kid and the boss himself were together in ways that went far beyond contracts and storylines. The rumor really picked up steam during Shawn's first run on top. He was cocky, controversial, and constantly seemed to get away with behavior that would have gotten anyone else fired. Late arrivals, attitude problems, wild partying, it didn't matter. Vince kept protecting him. To some, the only explanation was that Shawn had a hold over McMahon that went deeper than favoritism. Road Warrior Hawk even alluded to the outrageous claim, although, of course, there's never been proof. Others from that era have laughed it off as nonsense, saying Shawn was just Vince's chosen golden boy because of his talent and charisma. But fans weren't buying it. They saw the way Vince defended him, the way Shawn always seemed untouchable, and the pieces fit too perfectly into a scandalous story. Wrestling thrives on blurring the line between truth and fiction. A rumor like this stuck around not because people believed it outright, but because it made sense in a weird way. Vince was obsessed with creating stars. Shawn was the young showstopper he bet big on, and that combination looked suspicious enough for the locker room whispers to spread like wildfire. Bret Hart was in on the Montreal Screwjob. The Montreal Screwjob is maybe the most infamous moment in wrestling history. Survivor Series 1997. Bret, the Hitman Hart versus Shawn Michaels. Bret never tapped out. For decades, fans argued about what really happened. The accepted story is that Vince double-crossed Bret because Bret was leaving for WCW, and Vince didn't trust him to hand the title over the right way. Bret was furious, spat in Vince's face, and later punched him backstage. But then came the rumor. What if Bret was in on it all along? Some fans point out how perfectly the Screwjob set up Vince McMahon's Mr. McMahon villain character. They argue the whole thing was too clean, too perfectly timed to just be a chaotic accident. Was Bret playing his part, knowing it would go down as the most shocking betrayal in wrestling? Surely not. Bret has always stood firm that it was a real-life betrayal, one that hurt him deeply. His emotion that night looked too raw, too genuine to be an act. Still, the theory lives on, fueled by wrestling's blurred line between real and scripted. Could wrestling's greatest betrayal also be its greatest work? Rey Mysterio and Rachel from Friends. Every once in a while, wrestling rumors pop up that sound less like backstage gossip and more like something cooked up in a middle school cafeteria. Case in point, the bizarre story that Rey Mysterio was secretly dating Jennifer Aniston. You know, Rachel from Friends. The rumor spread when Friends was still one of the most popular shows on TV, and Rey was gaining traction in WCW with his high-flying moves. The idea of the 5'6" masked luchador being linked with one of Hollywood's biggest stars was so wild people couldn't help but repeat it. And it was all fueled by the National Enquirer running a story in 1997, claiming they were somehow involved. Maybe it was a work to boost Rey's standing. Maybe the Enquirer didn't quite divulge the entire story, and WCW ran with it anyway? It has since been refuted by Rey himself, although even years later, people still bring it up and refuse to let it lie like all good urban legends. Hulk Hogan's black eye. When Hulk Hogan walked out at WrestleMania 9, fans expected the usual, the red and yellow, the posing, the larger-than-life hero. But there was one thing nobody could ignore. Hogan had a huge black eye. There was never a straight explanation, which only fueled the fire. One theory, Macho Man Randy Savage punched Hogan out backstage. The story goes that Savage found out Hogan had been too close with his then-wife, Miss Elizabeth, and decked him before the big show. Given Savage's hot temper and the real-life tension between the two, fans found it easy to believe. Other whispers say it was an accident from training. Hogan himself claimed he got it from a jet ski crash. But because this was wrestling, people assumed the truth had to be far messier than that. After all, why would Hulk Hogan, the face of the company, go into WrestleMania looking like he just lost a bar fight? The black eye became almost bigger than the matches themselves. Fans weren't talking about Hogan swooping in to beat Yokozuna for the title. They were obsessing over what really happened to his face. Did Macho Man really land the punch? Or was it just bad luck before the biggest stage in wrestling? We'll probably never know, but the rumor refuses to die. Vince Russo was a WWE mole sent to ruin WCW. When WCW was crumbling in the late 90s, fans were desperate to explain how a company that once beat WWE in the ratings could fall apart so fast. Enter Vince Russo, the head writer behind WWE's Attitude Era. In 1999, Russo jumped ship to WCW, and almost immediately, the product got weird. Really weird. We're talking swerves for the sake of swerves, titles changing hands like hot potatoes, and storylines that made no sense. David Arquette became world champion. A pole match was booked for almost everything. All the fuel you ever needed. What if Vince McMahon secretly sent Russo to WCW to sabotage it from the inside? It wasn't a crazy idea to fans. Russo had been responsible for some of WWE's wildest, most successful storylines. So why would he suddenly be booking disasters in WCW? The theory was that Russo was pretending to help WCW while really running it into the ground, leaving WWE to rise back to the top. Of course, there's no real evidence of this. By all accounts, Russo truly wanted to make WCW successful, but his style, shock value over substance, just didn't click in a company already falling apart from politics, money issues, and bloated contracts. Still, the rumor persists because it fits the story. WWE won the war, WCW died, and Russo's chaotic booking was right in the middle of it.